Hello and welcome to Let's Talk About, a series spotlighting leaders, authors, artists, marketers, creators, and entrepreneurs sharing tips and expert advice across business, media, technology, climate change, and frankly, life itself. I'm your host, Cynthia Nelson, three-time entrepreneur, Forbes contributor, investor, and advisor. Today, we're talking to Michael Sigel. So caveat on this one, everybody. We are old and good friends, so he definitely knows where all the frickin' bodies are buried in my life. Well, at least most of them. He is the CEO of SCO2, a longtime entrepreneur, and he's an innovator in food manufacturing and sustainability. Michael, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much. This will be very fun, as usual.
Yeah.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
I think what most people are going to be interested in, at least that listen to this pod, is, how you got into this whole climate change, sustainability, innovation. You're an entrepreneur, you have a background, your family has a background. So I'd love to know how that inspired you to create SCO2 and how you got involved. Give me the backstory.
Yeah, I think I was fortunate or unfortunate to grow up in a very entrepreneurial family, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's a wild roller coaster that is a very true thing. And I think I probably picked up a lot of the traits just by osmosis and living and being around it. My dad was a very successful food entrepreneur, bringing a very new and novel product to market. And my mom was a very successful interior designer who literally created these new business models and ways of doing that practice that really hadn't been done before. And I think, a lot of, my dad may overshadow my mom's success in some ways, but they were both really, really good at what they did. And I think I picked up a lot of those, just key traits of, you know, being innovative, a lot of drive and determination, a lot of overcoming obstacles, solving somebody else's problems
Mhm.
that I sort of picked up along the way. And so when I see an opportunity, I've always been in, young, early stage or pure startup companies because I love that figuring out how we can apply our skills and solve like a meaningful problem that's worth solving. And with SCO2, that was very it was very evident that there was some potential here. It
Mhm.
just needed a little more kind of organization, prioritization, and try to kind of figure out, where the technology would really do its best work.
And what does, for everybody who doesn't know what SCO2, they're all thinking it's SEO, SEM. It's like, that's not what it is, everyone. So what is SCO2's technology? Like, what does it actually mean and how does it work? And, how are you actually turning waste into new revenue streams? Like, I love that. Like right away, waste is becoming revenue. So what does it do and how does it work?
So the caveat here is when engineers name a company, they name it things like SCO2, which stands for supercritical CO2,
Okay,
right? Which
I guess.
is it actually is a thing. And so look, it may be not the most clever name, but it sort of sticks because it's short and memorable,
Yep.
and that part works pretty well. So what I've learned, and I really didn't understand the technology when I got involved, and I'm not the founder, but I was one of the first kind of outsiders to come in and say, where do we take this thing? And as a builder of companies, it was like, hey, we have this great tech, but so what? And so I didn't understand what supercritical CO2 did or was, but what I did understand is that in the world that we live in every day, there's all kinds of things that have been extracted from a plant that
Mhm.
we interact with, whether that's the soap or shampoo we use, the toothpaste that's got mint in it, the things that are around us, whether it's vegetable oil, our perfumes. So in our foods, in our cosmetics, and so on, in our supplements, there are all kinds of these compounds that were extracted
Mhm.
one way or another from a plant.
Mhm.
So there are different kinds of solvents that do that, and supercritical CO2 would be considered a solvent
Mhm.
in order to basically attach the molecules you want from the plant and remove it from there. So it's like you're stripping it.
Got it.
So like vegetable oil would use typically like hexane, which is a little bit of a nasty chemical, but it's very effective
Mm-hmm.
at getting the oils out of soybeans.
Mm-hmm.
And then in a refining process, removes the hexane so we can eat it.
Interesting.
Ethanol is used, and supercritical CO2 is used. So what are the advantages of supercritical CO2? And we didn't invent it. It's been around for literally 30, 40, 50 years, but we made the way that it's done um, much, much better, more efficient, more scalable. The beautiful thing about supercritical CO2 is that it's a green process. So when it does its job and pulls these, kind of molecules of interest away from the plant,
Right.
it it dissipates and it's gone. So once it does its job, it it has no negative impact on the environment and has no negative impact on the material that you just extracted.
Way,
Uh,
way different than I imagine the other chemicals you're talking about.
Yeah, very much so. And now you've got that human component, right, of
Right.
dealing with these hazardous
Yeah,
materials. And then,
exactly.
there's risk in that. And, as good as you can do, it's really hard to get all of that stuff you don't want off of the stuff that you do want. And a lot of times it can cause damage. So, like, you wouldn't use, in some cases, like a hexane to go after like a high end, like even a THC or CBD, like a cannabinoid,
Right.
because you may cause damage to it by adding this chemical that's going to hurt it, or maybe it has to be extracted at a very high heat,
Right.
which can also cause damage to like volatile compounds. So supercritical CO2 has typically been used to target high value compounds that are sort of historically difficult to extract because it's very effective at doing this. It's just not very efficient. And that's really what SCO2 solved is just make it 10x better.
And then the scalability, obviously, right? So it's
Right.
better, it's simple, you can process more, cheaper, faster, more environmentally safe.
Yeah, I mean so it was sort of interesting the machine that the SAO2 tech is based on,
Mm.
it actually comes out of the recycling industry.
So
And our two founders were literally sitting around one of their dining room tables looking at the pond in their backyard where there was all kind of this duckweed.
mhm.
And they're like, God, there's got to be something we could do with that duckweed and try to find value in it or something because it was kind of a nuisance, right?
Yeah.
And um, and they were both familiar with a piece of equipment that was being used to recycle steel, and it was really the chips and shavings off of a
Mhm.
machining process,
Mhm.
and it was pressing these shavings and chips and trying to densify it into a purified ingot and push off the cutting fluids and oils to be reused.
Right.
Well, that was doing about 8,000 pounds of steel an hour at something like 80,000 psi of pressure, squeezing
Yeah.
steel together
Yeah. Yeah.
to be pure that could also be then recycled. And so as they were looking at the duckweed, they were like, if we made these modifications to this kind of equipment, we could probably be able to press the liquid out and then we could retract and then we could flood it with CO2 and then extract out all these valuable compounds and kind of automate this whole thing. And that was really
I've got to imagine that, food food processors, food manufacturers, right? They're always in this kind of squeeze to be, everybody is saying climate, 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 climate. What are you doing? Your feedstock, like, what are you doing to actually make it better? And so I would assume if they can do this faster, better, cheaper in a way that's also sustainable, that it's a great boon for them from not just a revenue stream side, although that's obviously part of it, but from a just a customer centric, we are doing the right thing, right?
for
We
sure.
are putting less waste into the world. We can
No, no question.
measure, I mean, I would imagine with this, you could measure the amount of waste you would have had and the amount of waste that you now have using the system, no?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And there's no doubt that there's a tremendous opportunity here, and that, you know, I've been a food manufacturer, right?
Yeah.
Recently in the juicing business. So we had our own share of, you know, processing waste,
Yeah.
rind, skins,
Yeah.
pulp,
Yeah.
etc. And trying to do, there's this internal dialogue, right? Within, it's kind of where the head and the heart, kind of conflict,
Yeah.
right? So, the good thing is like, businesses are, they're like profit seeking machines,
Yeah.
revenue seeking machines. They're trying to do what they can to make money.
Yes.
In the heart, says we should be good stewards of the planet, right? And
Yeah.
and there's a lot of great intention
Yeah.
to do that.
Yeah.
Where the head often wins is there's usually considered a cost of being more sustainable.
Right.
There's an investment, and some companies are way better than others of
Yeah.
doing this,
Sure. 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 Sure.
and some countries are better at this
I
as
was I
well.
was gonna say, we hear it in the US, it's coming here, but in Europe, I mean, they ban,
Well,
I know it from the beauty side, they ban, hundreds of different chemicals from
for
beauty,
sure.
but we ban like 12 of them or something. It's like it's an insane difference
Yeah. So
in
like in the last, like if you think about, as recently as even 5 years ago, and certainly before,
yeah,
the mentality has always sort of been outside of mind. I got a waste, I got a byproduct. It's like I just need it to be gone. And in the US, we got landfills.
right. Lots of them, we have a lot of land.
We have a lot of land, a lot of landfills, and it was, how do I press the easy button, make it go away?
We didn't have to solve that problem as fast, I would imagine, no?
Well, yeah, I think we didn't have to solve this. We didn't know how big of a problem it was,
Yeah, yeah, sure.
right? And until in the last decade, we've now understood that
Yes.
that isn't the best, but we've really not advanced technology enough from a processing standpoint to do anything much better with it.
Yeah.
So the common three things that are happening with this waste is animal feed,
Yeah.
composting,
Yeah.
or landfill.
Yeah.
The challenge is at the volumes we're talking about, and when we think about food waste,
It's
it's like
massive.
1.3 billion tons annually around the world, and that happens across the supply chain.
Yeah,
We
yeah,
kind of
yeah.
say from
Everywhere.
farm to fork
Yeah, from
is
farm.
happening. About 30-ish% happens at kind of the grower and processor level, and so that's where we're saying if we could find a better way, like processors are throwing up their hands. They're like, I don't know how to deal with it. The volumes are so great. I got to make it gone. I got
Yeah.
to be able to deal with it in a way that is sort of easy. And some of them are good at trying to figure out how else to use a byproduct,
Right.
right? And so they're
Right.
trying to minimize their waste. And in some cases, they're like, yeah, well, we compost it. Well, composting's like one notch above landfilling, and it isn't great. The problem,
It
the
doesn't,
problem with
a lot of it doesn't compost. I mean, a lot of,
it doesn't break,
it's like with
doesn't break
any
down.
kind of
And
manufacture, there's a lot of things that don't ever break down.
well, there's not a lot of value in compost usually, right? But there's a lot of cost with turning it, and making
Yeah.
it compost is not
Yeah.
that simple.
Yeah.
And sometimes there's toxins in that
Yeah.
biomass
That's
that's
what
going to leak into the ground.
and they leach into the water system and everything else. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what we've really done is made um, so for example, like when you do cannabis extraction,
Mm,
or create your cannabinoid that's going to go into your gummy, for
mm,
instance, right?
mm,
It's like 12 steps. One of them uses the supercritical CO2 extraction system,
mm.
right? And that is a very manual and long process to extract kind of in bulk
Yep.
those materials.
Yep.
But then to get it refined and distilled into what you want is another like 7 or 8 downstream steps. And you have like 3 or 4 upstream steps to do that. And what we've done is said, let's squish those all together, because that 12 steps is not
Yeah, it's
going
not,
to scale
it
to
won't,
do anything industrial.
yeah, it won't be profitable, won't scale, and then
Won't be profitable.
no one will use it, and then we're back to square one,
That's
basically.
right. And so between the energy consumption of it, the specialty equipment, the specialty operators that are needed, it just can't effectively scale. And so we said, well, what if we could automate, all of those things? So it's auto infeed, auto outfeed, and right out of extraction, let's do that separation
Hmm.
of of what we're looking for directly without having to do all these other steps. And so we had to go and prove that we could do that, which we did.
Yeah,
And it's the good and the bad about being first is that you're first. And
yeah,
so getting people to believe,
yeah.
like when one of our founders started going to talk to some of the supercritical experts out in the world about what we were doing in like 5 to 15 minutes versus a minimum of 40 minutes, they literally said, it's impossible. It can't be done. It's like, yeah, but I'm doing it and I have the lab results to
We
show
have
that I'm doing
results.
it.
Yeah, yeah.
So like, and I've been doing it now for, at that time he had been doing it for like a year and a half and then was looking for advice on how to do more and do it better, or if they would have an application for it.
Right, right.
And they basically laughed him out of the room, said, yeah, can't be done.
Sure.
Well, now we're doing it. And not only are we doing it, but the way we think about it is we're trying to unlock something with green extraction tech that just wasn't possible before. So some of our clients, like Ferrero, for instance, like they understand the core supercritical CO2 tech
Mhm.
and they've ruled it out. They're like, oh, that won't work for our application because it's too big. But when they meet us and we say, but here's how we've turned that on its head, they're like, oh, wait a minute. We gotta run this to ground. We gotta see if we gotta validate this
Yeah,
on our particular challenge.
right.
And so that's what we're doing now. So we're in paid pilots
Yeah,
to help prove or disprove that this is possible for them. And that's what's super exciting because this
yeah.
is new frontier
Oh,
kind of
completely.
technology.
I mean, it's groundbreaking, frankly,
Yeah, yeah.
you guys have done. And you're right, being number one, being the first out there, it is an Achilles heel. It sucks sometimes because
I think, oh
no,
yeah.
no one believes you. Oh, it's so sweet.
Well, and
No,
sometimes you doubt yourself.
and then you think, well, I'm like, yeah, am I nuts? Is this really a market? Like, do we really have the opportunity to go after this? So what do what do you see envisioning, if you're seeing crystal ball, 2 years, 5 years down the road, what do you see in the terms of, acceptance by the market, penetration of the company, and, your scale, like, where do you see it going?
I think that we're at the early stage of literally writing an entirely new green extraction standard
Mm-hmm.
for the industry, right? So like some of the things that we believe are quite possible is getting to the scale where we could maybe even compete with some of the things that are using hexane today.
Mm-hmm.
We're not there yet, so
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say, hey, we're going to go and knock off other players, but there's these pressures that are kind of converging
Mm-hmm.
of regulatory pressure to
Yeah.
eliminate hexane,
Yep.
right? Growing demand from it's amazing. We grow a third more food than we need in the world, and yet we have starving people
Yep.
around the world.
Yep.
And so there's this optimization that's going to happen in the food industry of which we can be a important part. And food waste needs to be tackled. It's obviously on
Yes.
the map of the UN as one of their, top sustainability initiatives
Yep.
because we understand the waste of resources and direct impact that can be tied
Yeah.
to the plan. So we look at it and say, let's not think about, taking 1 million tons of food waste off the table. What if we could do 100 million?
Exactly.
Right. 100 million moves the needle. 100 million's a few greenhouse gas, GHGs, greenhouse gas emission percentages off the table. Like
Right.
that moves the needle.
Yeah.
So where we're focused now is what are the large problems that we can help solve
Mhm.
to demonstrate the scale of what we're doing. So in the next couple of years, we're going to do that a few different times with a
Mhm.
few different kinds of
In a few different ways, yeah,
inputs,
yeah,
right?
yeah. And then from a company perspective, like where do you, is it gonna go public? Is it, what, I mean, it's early days, I know,
Yeah,
but it feels like, as one of our dear friends would say, it's all about timing and lighting.
that's right.
Right? So, it feels like the timing and lighting are really unique right now.
Mhm.
And there's a lot
Yeah.
happening. And this next generation also is demanding that the places that they work are better and do better. And this is a big one. So,
Well, this is really new too, where the consumer is actually showing up and voting with their wallet.
yeah,
Right? So they're making decisions on, like, we're part of the Upcycled Food Association,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And the Upcycled Food Association's been around now for, like, this is like their fifth year, and no one knows about it.
you're right.
Now
Right.
they're we're working on that, right? Like that's
Yeah,
important, but there is evidence out there that a consumer will actually pay more, and the transparency that they require, right? I mean, they're going to vote with who's actually being honest with them. Like, so
exactly.
like greenwashing is kind of out and
Yeah,
upcycling is kind of in, right?
yeah,
And so there's some challenges with upcycling too,
yeah.
from, consistency of, of material and scale and et cetera, depending on what is happening. Um, but yeah, the consumer starting to vote now with their wallet. So that whole thing, that whole mindset is shifting. What was your question?
I just think it just feels like someone's gonna take this off the table. Like
Oh,
someone's
so
gonna
yeah.
say,
So
well, this
here's
is
how
really great, and guess what? We're really massive. Hello, Nestle. Hello, Mars.
well,
Hello.
we're going to need to live in a bigger organization. So, like, the whole idea here is that we're up against the clock in some ways. So, if we
Yeah,
can prove the tech will scale and can
yeah,
see line of sight, we could, like, how do we go fast? Right. So, like, right now, we're almost like go slow now so we can go fast later.
yep,
And so it seems odd, but the idea right now is we're going to need to live in a bigger organization,
yeah.
whether that is we raise a whole bunch of money to go do it ourselves or plug into something that exists today
And they
so
all
that
have
tech can get
innovation
out there.
funds and investment funds and
Well, right. And think
every
about
one of the big guys, right? They all
there
have,
are some fantastic universities out there like UC Davis and
yeah,
such that
yeah,
their jobs is to kind of let's unlock these things with research to understand, like, look at California. There's every product known to man grown in California.
oh no, it's the breadbasket of the US.
It is. And
Most people
so
don't realize that.
if
They
we
think,
can accelerate the research, the
yeah,
problem is we can do the research all day long right now. There's no way to commercialize any of it.
exactly,
And
exactly.
so this could be a nice one step, two step where we see the future where a lot of these labs out there have a supercritical CO2 system. It's a legacy system.
Yeah, yeah,
And there's tons of research published on the things that we might want to go and, sort of mine from these waste streams. The problem is there is no process tech today to go get them. We had a client say, "Oh, yeah, it's like having gold on the moon. I know it's there. That's
it's
not the
there.
problem.
You have to
How
go
do I
get it.
get it?"
You have to
Right?
define it.
And they're like, "You guys might be able to help us get it." And that's where we want to, that's the gap we're trying to really fill, is say, not only can we should, because then you've really connected the head and the heart where, like, if I can talk to the chief sustainability officer and the CFO and help them understand that, hey, being more sustainable can be profitable, we've got their attention,
Yeah,
right? And they're going to want to vet that.
yeah,
And so, like, our path is, like, I don't go in and ask them for the moon. I say, let's go prove it or disprove it as fast and cheap as possible. And they go, yeah, let's go
okay.
do that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
I love the connecting the head and heart. Like that makes, a ton of sense. This is fascinating. My audience, this is very new. It's a new area. I think they're
Oh,
gonna
good.
really, get involved and love it. How did they get a hold of you? If someone wants to reach out, they want to, introduce you to one of their friends at the big food companies, or they
Yeah.
are in a big food company. How do they get you?
Yeah. Find me on LinkedIn, Michael Sigel. or through SCO2. You can find me under there, or just Michael at SCO2.com.
Awesome. Michael, thank you so much. I
My
appreciate
God, how fun. This is great. Thanks for the opportunity.
You're welcome.